You can scale your data, you can scale your algorithms, you can scale your team, but are you scaling you? What is leadership? How are you amplifying your capabilities to produce more significant impact than what can be achieved as an individual? Are you influencing, supervising, directing, and inspiring projects and people around you?
Hello, my name is Cathy Chang, co-author of Become a Leader in Data Science, Manning Publications. I built and led teams at Silicon Valley Data Science, where my teams and I parachuted into companies to address challenging and meaningful data needs. I have worked with leaders of centralized and distributed teams of data at companies large and small, all betting the next product differentiation on data. Whether it's addressing data architecture inadequacies at a large asset management firm or preparing a Fortune 50 global consumer packaged goods company for its biggest shopping day of the year, I see a distinct need for data science leaders as companies become data-centric. I will be moderating Ask Dr. Chong, Become a Leader in Data Science, Part 3, today. Ask Dr. Chong is a series where Dr. Chong addresses questions on situations and challenges encountered when taking on leadership roles in data science. Audience questions are encouraged and welcome. And we have, in addition to today's session, that's part 3, we have part 4 on February 13th, part 5 on March 13th, 6 on April 10th, and May on 8th. So second Saturday of each month. We'll see you each time. So today, let me begin with a brief introduction of Dr. Chong. Dr. Chong has personally mentored and promoted many data science leaders in the US and in China, in public and private companies. As an executive, he has built and grown multiple high-performing data teams. Dr. Chong was part of the executive team that took Eden Digital Limited public on New York Stock Exchange. He also expanded and led the data team as the chief data scientist at Acorns, designed and executed a project predicting venture investment risks at Silver Lake. He recently led the hiring marketplace data science team at LinkedIn, serving a business line with $4 billion a year in revenue. Dr. Chong, why don't we share the reasons behind authoring this book?
It's a pleasure to be here today. It's an exciting time for data scientists and those innovative companies that hires them, because producing industry-leading data science innovation is currently within the reach of many nimbly sized organizations. What we're seeing is that 95% of the companies with data science teams have teams of fewer than 10 members. Many of the data science leaders are eager to make great impact, take on more responsibilities, and develop themselves into executive leaders. But the directions and milestones are not so clear. Some large companies like Google and LinkedIn have leadership programs that address this challenge internally for some specific stage of the career development of data science leaders. But what about the rest of us? This is the main reason for writing the book. And the book is intended to help everyone understand your existing strengths and to assess your developmental opportunities for the next stage of your career. It also is a window into the concerns of your managers, so you can better understand where they might be coming from in their decision making process. And the book is in the Manning Early Access program with several chapters already available, and more chapters are coming online soon.
In chapter 1 of the book, we included a series of case studies highlighting common challenges we have observed in our experience. The case studies span from early career data scientists who recently entered this exciting field to mid-stage people who are beginning to lead teams to maturing leaders who head up functions and hold executive roles. Let's take a closer look at one of them today.
Okay, why don't we look at the case of Brian, a senior data scientist?
Sure. Brian has a degree in statistics. 2 years ago, Brian joined Z Corporation as a senior data scientist. He's a capable data scientist with about 3 years of prior work experience at a consulting company, and he also interned at an internet company when he was in school. He's got both service and product perspectives, if you will. Several colleagues who had joined around the same time at Z Corporation as Brian have already been promoted, including one from data scientist to senior data scientist and another from senior data scientist to staff data scientist, as well as a tech lead. Brian has his eyes on becoming a technology leader with a short-term goal of getting promoted from senior data scientist to staff data scientist. He brought it up with his manager, Walt, at their recent one-on-one meeting. However, Walt just told him that he's doing all the right things, he's doing right, but he needs to deliver more consistently. It's true that Brian has done the most number of projects as a senior data scientist per quarter at Z Corporation, though none of those produce spectacular results. As an example, the marketing director, Zoe, who Brian works with on the real-time marketing campaigns, almost always wants additional insights after each meeting. Brian felt compelled to serve the project stakeholders and provide further insights, which are extra work outside of the original project scope. When this pushed out the start date of the churn prediction project with the customer success department at the end of last quarter, Brian had to rush to complete it. Many other projects Brian has taken on, such as the customer responsiveness and engagement projects, they got delayed. Even the ones completed on time are compromised on the quality. Brian has tried to address this issue by taking the additional work into account in recent project planning cycles. However, when he does that, it just looked like he's not as productive as other teammates or is sandbagging on the schedules by assigning more sprints than necessary for the project scopes he's taking on. Brian feels really trapped in a cycle that does not go anywhere. What's happening? How can he advance his career and become a technology leader at Z Corporation?
Yes, this is a pretty representative case for those transitioning from a team member to a tech lead or a team lead. There are a number of senior data scientists I've coached and mentored who were in similar situations.
So let's just recap that briefly on the challenge. Okay. Brian is a technically solid data scientist, but feels trapped in a vicious cycle in his pursuit of becoming a leader in data science at Z Corporation. It turns out that while Brian is technically sound, he's less comfortable talking to the business partners, let alone pushing back. When business partners ask for additional explorations outside the planned scope, he feels compelled to devote time to it. In other words, Brian lacks some execution best practices in prioritization and communication.
Yes, so for Brian to prepare himself to take on the tech lead role, he has to practice influence without authority. So he is expected to work with business and engineering partners to influence their decisions on prioritization for the benefit of the company. And this includes specifying, prioritizing, planning, managing data science project while pushing back or at least calling out project scope creeps and setting expectations for success. So in chapter 2 of this book that we have, we discuss the goals and techniques for building the execution muscle for someone like Brian to practice influence in prioritization and communication. So in this case, what would be helpful coaching process for Brian? Um, well, first, we have to help him build confidence and then highlight his personal path for development and then help him leverage the organization that's around him for his success, as well as start him off on a clear roadmap for self-improvement. And as you are going through this case with us together, how you can get the most out of the case is see how you are measuring up to Brian's strengths in these areas. And then see if you have similar challenges for the new practices that we are talking about in this session, or you may have alternative solutions that could work even better in your situation. And you can also see if you have similar sources of support in your organization and see if you can start lining up your roadmap for a next step in development to incorporate some of these new practices.
So let's take a close look at Brian's strengths first that you listed.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So Brian's leadership strength is mainly in his technical capabilities and in his professional attitudes. So Cathy mentioned some earlier, but mainly it's in the area of framing the problem to maximize business impact and discover patterns in data, as well as exhibiting positivity and tenacity in working through failures. So let's go through them one by one. Right? First, in the area of framing the problem to maximize business impact. Brian is great with asking the following question in framing the problem. Is the analysis limited to historical data that can be batch processed, or are there real-time streaming sources that must be considered in developing the framing the problem? Now, also, you can ask the question, is the result for diagnostic purposes only, or are the results expected to be predictive as well? So with these answers, you can create the 4 quadrants with the dimensions that looks at are there hindsight that he's discovering about what happened? Are there insights that can be illustrated about what's happening? Are there foresights that can be predicted about what may happen in the future? And are there intelligence that can be put in place to make things happen given an interpretation of what's happening? And this is an organization that we learned from the Vic Anand Ganesan as he organized that in 2013. But how would you apply these in a real life case? So let's look at a case saying that for the performance of email marketing campaign for long-term engagement. Now, in this particular area, what we can look at is what are the hindsights that one can develop for the email marketing campaign for long-term engagement. One standard data science practice is to run an A/B test with a holdout set, where the holdout set includes everyone who does not see an email marketing campaign. You can run this campaign for a few months and assess later whether the lack of marketing campaign impacts long-term engagement. So this is kind of hindsight, but it has a long experimentation cycle and not efficient in driving improvements in operations. What if you change that framing a little bit? And to produce insight, another practice is to produce a real-time dashboard illustrating the trends in long-term engagement. And one can follow the decay of long-term engagement across different user vintages to detect early trends of success or failures. And these trends allowed the organization to make business decisions in real time with insights from these dashboards. But can you do better? What about using the framing of foresight? Well, given historical data, we can also build a model predicting long-term engagement using detectable short-term engagement characteristics like open rate, click-through rate, unsubscribe rate, landing page session length, session frequency, and etc. A predictive model can anticipate long-term effect with short-term observations so that we can gain the foresight necessary to adjust our email marketing strategy from week to week. And that's pretty powerful. But can we do even better? Well, with intelligence, we can include real-time analytics on channels such as the email. And then we can also prepare sequences of touches on the next best actions to drive new long-term engagement for specific segments of users. And when we can adapt the content of the next touches or the next best actions based on individual responses in real time, we can begin to see the intelligence in our algorithms driving long-term engagement based on user feedback. As you can see, by framing the problem with different levels of data science capabilities, business impact can increase from an A/B test readout to an automated dashboard to agile operations to leading the long-term engagement initiative with intelligent features in user experience. And we discuss this in more details in chapter 2.1.1, and you can see each of the topic and where we're illustrating them in more details in the top right corner of the screen. Great, so we talked about the first area. Let's talk about the second area of strengths that Brian has, which is capable of producing high quality analysis. And we talk about this through three different areas: understanding data characteristics, innovations in data engineering, and clarifying data modeling strategies. For understanding data characteristics, so we're mainly looking at four different type of characteristics. Um, these characteristics include the unit of decisioning, like figuring out the granularities for analysis and modeling, and this can be critical for effective analysis and modeling strategy. We should also be looking at, for our data, the sample size, the sparsity, and the outliers that can bias and hurt our analysis, leading to prioritizing our task to prepare data for analysis and modeling. We can also look at the sample imbalance and determine the sample balance strategy in our modeling and model optimization strategies, as well as the data types that we can use. For example, the varieties, including the individual transactions, the sequence of data, as well as the relationships between data that could be potentially represented in a graph. For innovations in feature engineering, we have many different aspects. We can have simple statistics, complex statistics, taxonomy-based analysis, as well as more advanced clustering analysis, as well as graph analysis. And you can see that they're all based on the data, and they can all provide insights for analysis and modeling and recommendation applications on top. And then we can also be looking at clarifying the modeling strategies. Here for the modeling strategies, there are three main types: the momentum-based, the foundational, and the reflexive modeling strategies. And they, in different situations, they could all combine to be part of the hybrid modeling strategy. So to go into it in a little bit more details, the momentum-based modeling strategy is about capturing trends or abstracting away factors that are not expected to change within a particular time horizon. And these are pretty popular in complex multi-agent environments, and is frequently used in high-frequency trading, recommendation systems, where the human or the algorithm decisions in a right environment operating pretty predictable ways. Then there is the foundational modeling strategies, where there are clear causal mechanisms for driving the predictability of the outcome. And it's often used for time series analysis in sales forecasting or infrastructure load predictions. And these are where various cyclical patterns and foundational patterns drive the outcome. Then you also have the reflexive modeling strategy, where you're exploring decision boundaries by collecting new data in an operationally smart way. And these examples include some complex multi or many class classification problems, or fraud detection with active feedback from fraud investigation professionals. And finally, with hybrid modeling strategies, we can look at different situations where there's data sparsity. You may be applying a reflexive modeling strategy to accumulate more data. And then if you are not clear about the mechanisms of your underlying prediction or the underlying system process for predictions, you can be first using the momentum-based modeling strategy. And once you have more domain understanding, understand the mechanisms of the domain, you can potentially involve a foundational modeling strategy. So with those, that's the second area of strength. And then let's look at the third area of strengths. Well, you may have come across idealized success stories like data wizard hacks together a solution using off-the-shelf machine learning algorithms in a few days and saves an organization millions of dollars a year. Well, the reality is very different from the hype in the media. So what does the reality look like? Well, Winston Churchill once said, success consists of going from failure to failure without the loss of enthusiasm. So the positivity and tenacity to work through failure is essential for a data scientist. Even with the best technical capabilities, not all attempts will arrive at successful outcomes. In fact, people have noticed that only about 10 to 30% of features considered promising to develop are eventually attaining business success. So while these are grim statistics that data science tech lead needs to work with when managing stakeholder expectations, well, even those failures, project failures, can reveal learning that can drive enterprise value. Now, throughout a data science project, the learning includes the data source explored, the tools used, the assumptions made, and the methodologies developed. These are actually opportunities that we'll introduce in more details in section 3.1.3 that tech lead can start sharing with the rest of the team members. So what can the tech lead do? Well, a tech lead can be as effective as Brian. One technique for motivating the team to build trust with partners is to communicate any institutional learnings from the succeeded or failed project in a prompt and regular way. And what these can do is these crystallized learning can help individual team members stay motivated in their project by recognizing their impact on business. And it can help your business partners and executives to see the progress that you're making towards bigger wins down the road.
So we have discussed Brian's strength in detail in 1, framing the problem to maximize business impact, 2, discovering patterns in data, and 3, exhibiting positivity and tenacity to work through failures. Let's look at the opportunities that can help him better communicate with his partners and to push back on requests when required.
Yes, let's talk about 3 areas of opportunity for Brian. 1, specify and prioritize projects from vague requirements. 2, plan and manage a data science project effectively. And 3, setting expectations for success with partners and executives. For the first opportunity, rigorously planning and prioritizing, we start with interpreting the business need. And this can be challenging for many data scientists, as many of your partners may not be yet familiar with all the capabilities data science can bring and provide. And they often provide requests that may not be framed in the best way. So effective data science leads have learned to ask the questions behind the questions, to take personal accountability for setting data science project up for success.
John G. Miller, QBQ, the question behind the question, practicing personal accountability at work and life. This is an important perspective to have in a situation.
Yes, that's a good book that you mentioned. And there's actually quite a bit of nuance in a request, and some as straightforward as a personalized email campaign, as you saw earlier. And when your marketing partners come knocking, uh, one important question you can ask yourself is, are you taking personal responsibility in asking why we're looking to drive a long-term user engagement? So what type of user engagement is more valuable for improving enterprise value? What are some of the return on investment or ROI expectations in these cases? These are the kind of questions you should be asking your partners to make sure you have a deeper understanding of what what their fundamental goals are for their request. For example, Brian can share the trade-offs about targeting the different sets of users, like the active users, passive users, inactive users, or prospective users. And in each of these cases, you may have a trade-off between the amount of information you have for personalization and the uh, amount of lift you can get from those personalization capabilities, as well as the size of the population that you have to target. So with many possible requests from partners for each business initiative, Brian also needs to prioritize the request. And there are three levels of diligence that Brian can use for data science project prioritization. They include the innovation versus impact, priority refinement with the RICE strategy. That's an acronym. We'll explain in a bit.
Actually, we talked about rice in detail at the previous part 2,
Yes, we did.
December 12th. So take a look.
That's right. And also prioritizing with alignment to data strategy. So one of the ways to look at this is by Jacqueline Nolles in her blog, Prioritizing Data Science Work. And she's actually also the author of another Manning book, Building a Career in Data Science. And in this prioritization process, the innovative, impactful projects are prioritized, and other projects that are routine, like data reporting, that may be marginally impactful for business operations, are deprecated or are looked at to be automated. And then you have projects that are impactful for business where we can refine them to further assess 4 areas, the RICE areas: reach, impact, confidence, and effort. With these different sets of evaluations, an initial prioritization can be used to rank the projects. Now, in terms of these different areas, reach and confidence and effort are relatively easy to assess, mainly because for reach, we have the user segmentations to rely on. For confidence, we can look at how effective our algorithms tend to be based on past experience. And for effort, we can also reference prior efforts, similar efforts, to look at how many weeks, engineering weeks, for example, would be required to make it successful. What's a little bit harder to assess is the impact in terms of how much lift our algorithms, our projects can bring to the business. And for that, we also explain the challenges in more details in the section 2.2.1. And looking at also the last area in planning and prioritization, well, for some data science project, that often spans the full stack of technologies, from data source identification to data aggregation to data enrichment to modeling strategies to evaluation frameworks, as well as A/B testing. That can be a lot of work, and these large effort often fails to be prioritized. But what we can do is look at some larger projects from a data strategy perspective to see whether some of these components are actually developing capabilities that can be used across multiple projects. And by amortizing some of these components in the investment, some of these components across multiple projects, we can reduce the cost or the investment for a particular project and be able to allow them to have a higher ROI so that you can prioritize them earlier in the process.
So the second opportunity for Brian that you mentioned about, can you give him a little more detail?
Yes. So the second area is for planning and managing a data science project. And many times, the reason that data scientists find it hard to push back project scope increases is because the project scope is not well defined in the first place. So let's first look at there are the 9 common types of data science project. And compared to many other technical and engineering projects, data science project often involves more partners, face greater uncertainties, and are harder to manage for success. So with such a wide range of data science project types, we can first look at what is the goal or the scope that you would like to define the project to be under, and then use that scope to assess whether the additional requests are reasonable increases in the project scope. And then we can also take a look at the common project failure modes. And to be responsible for these data science project, there are 9 common project failure modes. And in Brian's case, we're mainly looking at these 3. The value of the project may not be clearly defined, the metric of success may not be well aligned, or the company strategy may have changed after the project definition. When there are ambiguities in these areas, it will be hard to assess when project partner requests are reasonable towards producing the intended business outcomes. And then we can also look at how we can zero in on the planning process. For the purpose of the project plan is to address these failure modes to best align the team's goals to avoid wasted efforts. So it also serves to align the understanding with our business teams to coordinate and commit resources towards the business strategy. For the project motivation, for example, for many data science projects, you want there to be a clear outcome with a challenge to be resolved. For project definition, a data science project should have a concise definition of input and output that can be resolved, that can resolve the customer's challenge. For the solution architecture, the solution architecture section should include an outline of the technology choices made for resolving the challenge. And for the execution timeline, the 2 important components are the phases of execution and synchronization cadence, where in this case, as Brian takes on the data science project, there could be many unknowns for data and patterns that will be discovered. So there may be a phased execution for proving out the data and proving out the launch or the deployment process, for example. And then for the synchronization cadence, for a successful project, you often want to have regular synchronizations between the different project partner teams. And finally, for the risks to anticipate, um, uh, there are many sources of technical risks that can derail a data science project and prevent it from achieving the return on investment it promises. And before you get concerned about the and before you start on the project, just a simple mental thinking process for checking the data sources, potential partner reorgs, new data-driven features that's coming online that could influence the data sources you have, looking at what existing features that's there, and looking at potential solution architecture dependencies. Some of these thinking process can help you anticipate many of the risks that may come up. And before you feel overwhelmed about how significant all of this planning process is. Really, just a thoughtful 3 to 5 bullet points for each subsection can go a long way in reducing the risk of failure and increase your project's likelihood of success. So in this way, like when a partner come with new requests for a scope increase, with this rigorous plan in hand, Brian can be much better oriented to accept the scope increases or push back on the ones that are less relevant for producing business impact.
That's quite a few tools for planning and managing a data science project as a second opportunity area in the second opportunity area. And there's a third as well, right?
Yes.
So that's for setting expectation for success. Please talk about that.
Yes. So setting expectation for success is especially important for data scientists in small organizations. I have many personal experiences and have mentored many people with those kind of situations where they're working with senior executives in partner organizations who may have heard some machine learning use cases that has triggered some unexpected, unrealistic expectations for them. So in this case, we illustrate 4 levels of confidence Brian can use to talk about his models. So first, for level 1, this is the levels of confidence for recommendation and ranking. And this works in situations where there is a vast set of potential content to bring to the attention of customers who have limited attentions. And the goal is to anticipate what content would be most engaging for segmented users. And success is in recommendation is often evaluating lift, which maps to the incremental business impact for using a model or a better model for recommending solutions. And we often use this lift where, say, if you have an engagement improvement from 4% engagement to 5% engagement, that would be a 25% lift. Then you have situations where the algorithm is good enough to produce results close to human capability, but not quite good enough yet. And this is sort of the level 2 assistant level. And success is assessed by the increase in human productivity with the assistance of the algorithm. With even better algorithms, you can be automating many of the results. And these are machine learning models that can produce results at human parity. And success in these cases means adopting the models that can perform at human accuracy such that we can significantly increase the reach to serve previously unreachable populations or populations that's uneconomical to reach with human assistance. And then finally, with the automated autonomous agent. At this level, the machine learning models can be producing results at superhuman capabilities. And we see these in high frequency trading and the power networks, power distribution networks, optimization, for example. And success in this case is for human operators to overcome their suspicion and have the leap of faith to trust the autonomous agents to correctly operate with the strategies they define to produce the anticipated results. So with a deeper understanding of the customers and the improvements in model capabilities, you can better explain to your customers and setting their expectations to one of these 4 levels. And for Brian, he can recognize when customer or partner expectations for solutions surpasses the capabilities of the technology, and he can better refocus the measurement of success at the appropriate level of success.
Great. So that some specific opportunities for Brian. We discussed specify and prioritize project from vague requirements. The second area was plan and manage a data science project to succeed. And 3 was setting expectations for success. What about leveraging around the organization to help Brian succeed?
Yes. So Brian can learn from his peers by to increase the success rate of his project. And these knowledge that he'll be looking for include the data sources examined, the tools used, assumptions made, as well as the methodologies developed. And all these can come from projects that has succeeded or failed. And we'll we have discussed these in a lot more details in section 3.1.3 in the book.
Excellent. What kind of requests can Brian make to his manager to become more mature for himself in his role?
Yes. So one challenge with making requests to his manager is that it really depends on his manager's style and experience. What can help with making the specific requests um, better for your manager is to provide is to first understand your manager's capabilities and where he's more comfortable, the areas he's more comfortable, or he's more his strength areas, and you can look at three areas that there's three ways that he can help you or he or she can help you.
Well, in this case, Walt. So he, yeah.
Yes. So it can be through coaching, mentoring, or advising. So for coaching, coaching is this process of unlocking a team member's potential to maximize their performance. And this is a custom tailored development process, often in a formal one-on-one setting. So a coach, in this case, Walt, could observe and provide feedback with a focus on the process of asking questions to Brian. And through these questions, a good coach can facilitate a team member to clarify goals, focus on what needs to be done, and discover the best strategies for achieving those goals. Then, for if Brian's asking Walt for mentoring, well, mentoring is a process of a mentor imparting wisdom and sharing knowledge with a less experienced colleague. So for mentoring to work effectively, the topic should be beyond just coaching for goals, focus, and process. And it should also include the mastery of capabilities and virtues, like the ones that's described in this book. So mentorship for capabilities can have immediate benefit for execution. Mentorship in virtues can have a long-lasting effect on Brian's character as well. And then in areas where there are specific questions, Brian can ask for advice from Walt. Advising is a process of providing information and direction for specific problems at hand. So for advising to work well, Brian should make sure that he has shared his strengths and weaknesses with Walt so that Walt can position him in projects that highlight his strengths and offer help for dealing with his weak areas.
So, in brief summary, we talked about Brian's request to the team that openly share knowledge around data sources examined, tools used, assumptions made, methodologies developed, and his coordination with his manager, Walt, on coaching, mentoring, and advising. There are ways Brian can leverage the organization to produce greater impact in the team for the company. Let's line up a roadmap to incorporate new practices for Brian. Throughout the process of recognizing his strength and identifying opportunities, Paul becomes more ready to acknowledge his own finiteness as an individual human being to discover limitations relative to strength in gaining clarity to the path forward. We recommend two processes for next steps. With the leadership strength and potential development areas identified, Paul can experiment with a simple choose, practice, and review process, or short CPR, choose, practice, and review. And that is in the context of a 2-week check-in, with a 2-week check-in. Now he can self-coach with a model that's shorthand GROW, G-R-O-W. We'll look at each of these in detail. Choose. So the CPR first. Choose. Select 1 to 2 items from the table to work on. And I'll show you the table in a little bit. As an example, you may choose to clarify the project plan for your current project. In this case, Brian could choose a project that the project to work on in terms of clarifying the goals of his project. Now, practice. For each project you're involved in, practice a skill you have chosen to work on. So in this case, Brian chose to clarify project plan for the current project. He may want to use the organizational vision and mission to clarify the project's technical directions and craft a 5-point narrative to crystallize his thinking and align with his manager, Walt, in a direction of the project. By when will he do this, with whom, and where or in what context would he plan to do this? Now, for you, you can do the same thing. What is your organization's vision and mission? How does that align with your project direction? And what's your 5-point narrative to crystallize your thinking and align with your manager on the direction of the project? Now, review. Set up a meeting with yourself, or in this case, Brian with himself, in 2 weeks and check in to come back to this section of the book and assess if there's now a better understanding or command of the skill. Well, do I know, if I'm looking at this, do I know the company initiative the project serves and its impact? Is a metric of project success clear? Are partners aligned on milestones and outcomes? And I can choose, or you can choose to take another sprint to further develop the skill or move on to the next CPR cycle. For the self-review, you can use a project-based skill improvement template to help you structure your actions over the 2-week sprints. So going back to the example that we're looking at planning the project for success. So first you selected the skill and task you have, that's what is the plan for my current project? Set the date in the 2-week period that you can apply the skill. Well, January 23rd sounds like a good date. Write down the names of those that you want to apply the skill with, or in the case of doing this yourself, write self. So it could be your team members, could be yourself. Now select the location or occasion that you can apply the skill. Well, is it going to be in the one-on-one with your manager? Is it going to be in the project milestone sync, sprint sync meeting, or next steps for project X, Y, or Z? So how do you do, and review the results. How did you do compared to before? Do I know the company initiatives it serves and its impact? What about the metric of the project success? Is that clear? Are partners aligned on milestones and outcomes? By holding yourself accountable of these steps in a self-review, you can start to exercise your strength and shed light on any blind spots you may have in terms of tech lead capabilities. So again, as an example, if you decide to focus on the goal of improving project success through rigorous application of expert knowledge, your specific goal could be to infuse expert knowledge into the projects by clarifying the project context of opportunities or risks of your current project. Now, if you look at the reality, what actions have you taken so far? Have you aligned on the project goal with the organizational vision and mission? You can find that in section 2.3.1. Are you confident that your work and the team's work can stay aligned with the direction intended by the executive team? What about potential ethical challenges in the project you need to be aware of early on? You can find more on section 3.1 about this. As you examine the obstacles and options, some questions to consider are: have you accounted for the data source nuances so you can recognize the biases, inaccuracies, and incompleteness in detail. It's important because that shows up in stumbling blocks or stone walls in the road to achieving project success. There are many, many questions you can ask and answer. So finally, let's look at the will or way forward. What options will you choose? When will you start? And what will you commit to doing? Okay? Let's take a look at how this all aligns with our book. I know it's an eye chart, right? Oops. It's an eye chart. Let me, okay. It's not meant to be read word for word, but at the high level, we organize the book in 4 main parts or stages. Brian's role is that of a senior data scientist working to become a tech lead stage. So in each stage, there are 2 main parts: the hard skills, which we call capabilities, and the soft psychosocial skills, which we call virtues. Capabilities are further discussed in TEE, or Technology Execution Expert Knowledge. Technology is the tools and frameworks for you to lead more effectively, such as framing the problem, understanding data characteristics, and innovating in feature engineering and driving clarity in modeling strategy. And of course, setting expectation for success. Execution is for you to specify projects from vague requirements, prioritize and plan projects while balancing difficult trade-offs. Expert knowledge, that's domain knowledge for you to clarify project alignment to organizational vision and mission, account for data source nuances, and navigate structural challenges in organization. So with that, there's also, of course, the ethics, rigor, and attitude. And these are on the softer side of the spectrum. Let me highlight on this slide a little bit on the orientation in the capabilities and virtues matrix. Recognize leadership strength, opportunities for new practices, and leverage the organization. So in terms of recognizing leadership strength, we're talking about framing the problem, discovering patterns in data, and staying positive despite failures. And these are things we talked about in detail, and we need to not only understand the distinctions, but also communicate any learning from succeeded or failed projects promptly and regularly to help us. In terms of opportunities, there's specifying and prioritizing projects, there's planning and managing projects, and setting expectation for success. And in terms of leveraging the organization, there's requests for the team. How can you examine data sources, tools? What about the tools used, assumptions made, methodologies developed? Reach out to the manager. Make specific requests for coaching, mentoring, advising your manager can comfortably provide to you. And finally, line up a roadmap to incorporate any new practices.
Yes. And you can see that there are corresponding areas in the eye chart in the capability and virtue matrix there. And what you can see is there are green areas that are the strengths, red areas that are the opportunities, as well as the leverage areas where Brian can leverage his peers as well as his manager to be able to produce bigger impact for his organization.
Okay. So let's take a look at the questions that might arise with this material specifically. So we got about 5 minutes, and let's take a look at a couple of questions here. So one is, what is the main difference between a data science manager or a tech lead? And would I be better off going for one versus the other?
Yes. So in this, let's put it this way. So for both tech leads and data science managers, they are responsible for producing the business impact. The key distinction in these 2 different roles is that the tech leads project, and the data science managers leads teams and nurtures people. And for those of us who are parents, right, it's like being responsible for particular chores as a tech lead, or raising kids at home, like nurturing your team. So the team lead has to influence peers to be able to get the projects done, and the managers needs to inspire their team members, but also grow them professionally to be able to increase the capabilities of the team as a whole. So if you have been inspired by your manager to grow professionally, and you would like to do that for others as well, that would make a great motivation to acquire a different set of skill sets as a manager, as a people manager. And we describe many of those in the book. And by the way, if you have any specific questions, you can also add them in the chat in this session.
Okay. A question I often come across with people that I interact with is, do you have to become a tech lead before becoming a manager in data science?
Um, I think you should have many of the skills of a tech lead, but in small data science organizations, often we are taking on multiple roles. So as a manager, you'll be responsible for coaching, mentoring, and advising your team. Some of the capabilities of tech leads are essential so that you can properly advise and mentor your team members. And you also have to understand um, and that you are also responsible for practicing the skills of a tech lead at the manager or even at the director level at times, as you will take on personal uh, projects that will require you to have those tech lead skills. So that's why in this particular book, we organize these topics as portfolios of capabilities and virtues at the particular for the particular roles, and they're not requirements for the particular roles. And we're all practitioners of these capabilities and virtues, and we're doing this to become better selves, to produce greater impact for our company.
And if you look at what we highlighted in terms of different colors on the eye chart or the table, the matrix, there's the first column is specifically for data leads, and the second column is specifically for data science managers. And you can do a self-assessment on where your strengths are and where your opportunities are and where you might be able to leverage on in each of those columns, and make that assessment for yourself. So with that, I want to share with you that this is part 3, and we had 2 other parts that are available in both the Twitch format as past sessions, one from November and one from December. And we have 4 sessions that are coming up. The next session is February 13th, where we're going to go through another case and also take your questions as well. So we want to take this time to thank you very much to join us in 2021 for the first part. And we are here to help you become a leader in data science. Thank you.